I think we had a quite entertaining lecture last week from Sean O'Day. We're going to get back now to kind of the more meat and potatoes, away from the lived it. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, I was talking to you about different types of business, consulting versus product businesses, and some of the issues around financing those. Delighted to have a speaker tonight, Raphael Ronen, to carry on with that theme, to talk about evaluating technologies, issues like, should I license this? Should I start up my own company? How do you evaluate opportunities and decide how to commercialize them? Raphael has a background, an engineering degree from University of Waterloo, and a Master of Science in Medical Biophysics from UWO. He's been in the commercialization business for a number of years. He was working on technologies around imaging and medical devices at the Robarts Research Institute in London, and now he's with the Innovations Group here in Mars, which is the commercialization vehicle for U of T, TIG, and he works there. He evaluates technologies, develops commercialization strategies, and then takes them to market, whether licensing or whether it's creating and startups, and has had experience in all of those different activities. So I couldn't think of a better speaker to lead you through this topic. And so, Raphael, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Tony. I've always wanted to be the meat and potatoes. Thanks to everybody who's given up their Wednesday afternoon to come and listen to this talk. I hope there's something in it that everybody can take away from it. As Tony said, my name's Raphael Ronen. I work with the Innovations Group, which is the commercialization wing of the University of Toronto. We work on commercializing research technology that both emanates from U of T, as well as Sunnybrook, Bloorview, some stuff out of St. Mike's, and some other institutions. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to technology commercialization. I realize this is only the third lecture in the Entrepreneurship 101 lecture, so I'm going to give you some breadth to my talk, and then focus in on a few areas that I think are particularly important, lessons we can take away from the research setting. So I'm fortunate to have at least one of my offices here in Mars on the 3rd floor with the Innovations Group. To give you a feel for what I do, I've stolen this quotation from Tim McTiernan, who's my executive director. And he said, at TIG, at the Innovations Group, we bring together researchers and businesses to capitalize on the research that's done here. And there's more than $2 million of research done daily at the University of Toronto and the affiliated hospitals. What that means is that myself and my colleagues see a lot of great ideas come through. We spend a lot of time evaluating these great scientific ideas and trying to determine which of those have commercial potential, and then acting on that commercial potential, trying to make it deliver something. In my very limited world, there is an idea. That idea might come out of research, it might come out of somewhere else. The next step is to determine if it has commercial potential, if it's more than just a neat scientific idea. Once we determine that it does have potential, there are two streams of development that occur. One is on the business side, and that's where I focus a lot of my time. The other is technology development. And through those two trains, we really build value. In my world, I know I have value when someone's willing to put money forward. This could be financing into a startup company, or it could be someone who's basically willing to license the technology or buy the technology in the form of a license. For you, and I'm sure there's a diverse crowd out there, you might be looking at a startup, you might have different goals, but this path is fairly common. So first, commercial potential, spend a lot of time assessing technologies. When I talk about business development, it's protecting the technology in the form of patenting. Most of what I see, as Tony mentioned, are medical devices and medical imaging technology. It's technology-based, and so there's generally something that can be protected in the form of a patent. I spend time trying to bring in funding and financing to move the technology forward, and then working on a business strategy to get it out of the research lab and then trying to market it to people who will be able to take it further. In the end, we spend time negotiating licenses and startups. That's sort of my end point. And I'm sure you'll have speakers coming in later where that's their beginning point. I'm going to break my talk into two major sections. I'm going to spend about 25 minutes talking about how I assess technology. When I assess technology, I'm looking for its strengths and its weaknesses. And in the end, I'm looking to answer that question, is it worth me spending time on? Is it worth me spending money on? For you and your companies, I encourage you to assess them using perhaps some of the tools I present here today to see where your strengths lie. After that, I'm going to focus on a few lessons that really come out in the academic setting. You might not get these things discussed from someone who comes strictly from a business end, but these ideas are relevant across fields. The idea of should I start up or should I license, where to bring in funding and financing, and a concept of ownership that Tony asked me to talk about that I think is very important. So in terms of evaluating the value or assessing the value of technology, I look at four key categories. One, I look at the IP, the intellectual property. Secondly, I look at the technology, the market. Is there a market for it? Who am I going to sell it to? And what does the team look like, which is perhaps one of the most important questions. Now, understanding this is the third lecture, I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer on what I mean by intellectual property or IP. And generally in the commercial realm, or in the technology realm, we're talking about patents. Copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, know-how also fit in this category. But when we're talking about patents, well, what a patent is a monopoly. Basically, the governments from around the world are willing to reward you for sharing your idea. And if you've ever read a patent, or if you've ever written a patent, you're basically fully describing your technology and its applications. And in return for sharing your ideas with the world, you get this 20-year monopoly. You get this 20-year period where you're the only person who's allowed to sell the technology that's in your patent, your invention. The governments are willing to do this because they see a greater good. They see that after those 20 years, anybody can sell, anybody can use the technology in your patents. It's no longer yours. So greater good might not be important today, to you today. You're thinking, my greater good. So why patent? The first is it can give you a competitive advantage. If you have a piece of technology and you have a patent around that technology, then you're the only one who's allowed to do it. Your competitors can't do it. It can give you an edge. Secondly, it incentivizes people to invest in research and development. Nobody's going to spend a lot of money on R&D if they know that their competitor can come at the end of that R&D and use their results. So patents allow people to invest in R&D and then recoup those costs and make a profit. One of the best examples of this are pharmaceutical companies. And I've heard numbers all across the board, but on average, I've heard it costs between $500 million and $1.2 billion to bring a drug to market. And that takes into account all the drugs that don't make it, all the regulatory hurdles along the way in the clinical trials. And it can take anywhere from 8 to 15 years to get a drug out. So if you're a pharmaceutical company, if you look at my little graph at the bottom, you have an idea, you file a patent. You then invest a lot of time and a lot of money in your R&D and in getting approvals. At the end of that, you have maybe 5 to 12 years to recoup those costs. And that's why we see drug costs being so high, because they're trying to both recoup those costs and make a serious profit so that they can look at further drugs down the pipeline. So now that I've given you the background on patents, the background on IP, let's talk about what to look at in terms of judging the strength of your IP. So first you need to ask, is my invention patentable? Can I get a patent around my invention? And there are three things that you need to get a patent. And the US Patent Office, the Canadian Patent Office, they're very clear on these. The first is novelty. It has to be new. And by new, I mean it can't be out there. Nobody can be selling it. And what we often see in science is we see scientists going out and presenting their concept, and then afterwards they want to patent it. And there are a lot of issues with that. So you definitely want to patent before you start talking about it. The second issue of non-obviousness, I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm sure you'll have a patent agent talk to you later. But the idea is I can't take patent 1 and patent 2 and put them together in some obvious fashion and have a new invention. That's not going to work. The third piece that you need is utility, which basically means it has to be of use. Two other points that are often glossed over but are very important in judging the value of your intellectual property is one, do you have freedom to practice or freedom to operate? And what I mean by that is you might be able to get a patent in a very narrow field, but your product at the end of the day needs your patent as well as some other people's patents. And you can't just use their patents. That's called infringement. That's illegal. So you have to buy it from them or you wouldn't be able to go forward. So one thing I encourage a lot of entrepreneurs to do is to spend time looking through the prior art, Google searching. Google.com/patents has all the US patents, the applications and the issued patents. See what else is out there. See what else you might need in your product if you really have freedom in your space. The last issue, again, often skimmed over, is the idea of infringement detection. Say you have something that is patented, can you actually determine if someone's using that? One example is a software algorithm. You might have a great software algorithm, and someone might come out with a product, and that algorithm's buried so deep under the surface that you have no way to know if they're using your patent or not. One question I often get from entrepreneurs are, how much do patents cost and what sort of timelines do we have? What most people do first is they file a provisional patent. It's basically a placeholder. It doesn't have to be a full patent. It basically, if you're familiar with scientific papers, it could be a scientific paper. The important thing is that it captures all the aspects of your technology, of your invention. And that provisional patent lasts a year. You can file one yourself online at the USPTO for $105, though I would seriously and strongly recommend that you engage a patent agent to review your provisional patent and make appropriate changes. So that will probably cost you $2,000 to $4,000. At the end of your provisional patent, you sort of have this year. In this year, you're developing the technology, you're looking for receptors. At the end, you might determine, there's nothing there, I'm going to cut my losses, and you abandon your patent. You just don't do anything. Or you might say, it's worthwhile continuing. Generally, what people do is they'll file what's called a PCT. Think of it as an additional placeholder. But at this point, you need a full patent that's filed, so you need to engage a patent agent. Having a patent drafted will probably cost you somewhere between $7,000 and $10,000, and then you have filing fees. So in these first 30 months, you've spent somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000. At that point, it gets expensive. You need to determine what countries you want to enter. And then in the next 3 to 7 years, you're going to go back and forth with the patent office. Costs are going to go up. Now, in my experience, the best numbers I've seen are about $25,000 to get a patent through in the US and Canada. And if you want to include Europe and Japan, you're probably looking at an extra $50,000 per patent. Patenting is not cheap. When you patent, you want to ensure, or you want a good sense, that what you're patenting is valuable and that you'll be able to get it in the end. There have been a lot of great technologies that have been patented. Edison patented the light bulb. This is Velcro, which I'm sure has made a lot of money. This is the airbag, another great invention that was patented. By the same token, just because you get a patent, it does not mean it's worth anything. This is an eating utensil. It's like chopsticks, but it has a fork at the end. So you can look like you know how to use chopsticks. I don't think there's a need. I don't think this patent has ever made any money. Here's another interesting patent. This is the Hyperlight speed antenna, which, if you look down here, will allow signals to travel great distances at many times the speed of light. For those of you without a physics or engineering background, trust me, it's not possible. They got the patent, but there's nothing behind it. Here's an interesting patent, and it goes back to the freedom to operate I mentioned earlier. This is a laser pointer to give your cat exercise. You laugh, but it's a great idea. This was patented, this got accepted back in '95. They probably patented it in 1990. Everybody knows someone who has a cat, they have a laser pointer, they exercise their cat. What's the problem? The problem is, I can take my great laser pointer here, which is for my presentation. I can take it home, I can exercise my cat, and I'll never pay you. And you have no way of really enforcing your patent or of detecting that I'm using this laser pointer at home. Good idea, but it'll never make any money. So that's all you get on IP. Let's go to technology. In technology, when I see something coming along, the first questions I have are, do you understand what the science background is? The Hyperlight speed antenna would get killed right here. Secondly, is there data to back it up? So it sounds right. Do you have something to back it up? Then, is it developed? Because there's a lot of value in having technology that is developed, a lot more value in a developed idea than an idea. And then, if it's not developed, do you have a team that can bring it there? In the end, I'm really saying, is what you have real, and will it work? And I encourage everybody who has an idea to really focus on this subject, because you want something that is going to yield something at the end of the day, and you want to avoid getting into a groupthink attitude where everybody just says it's going to work. The other point I want to make, again, is that there is a huge amount of value in having a technology that works. A lot of people have ideas. Remarkably few people can actually execute their ideas. So here's a great example. As Tony mentioned, I used to work at the Robarts Research Institute. And about a decade ago, some graduate students, some technicians, wanted to create a MicroCT system. So CT, some people know it as CAT, some people know it as computed tomography. It's a way of rotating an X-ray in 3 dimensions, and it gives you a 3-dimensional image using X-ray. So here in the middle is an image of a rat. And so back then, they had absolutely no IP. But they understood X-ray. They had data to back it up. First, they didn't have a developed technology, but they had a really strong team. They made their product. It was a very, very small market. They sold into it. Then the market grew. They sold more, and they were eventually bought out by GE, and the inventors are very happy right now. Let's talk a little bit about the market. So this is a laundry list of things to look at in the market, and you should look at them all. I'm going to go through them with an example. Anybody here watch Dragon's Den? Good. So about a month ago, 2 of my friends presented an idea on Dragon's Den, Steve and Raul. And what they saw is they saw a need with their grandparents. They realized that their grandparents didn't feel comfortable around computers, they didn't know how to use computers, they were intimidated by computers. And so what they did is they went out and they developed a front-end user interface. And this is what it looks like on the left. It has 5 buttons: internet, photos, mail, games, and turn off computer. You do not have to deal with any of the abstractions that are in Windows or even with Macs. This is the next level of simplicity. So they saw the need, and they addressed that need. The market is huge. Elderly are large. Seniors who feel uncomfortable around computers is very large, and I don't see a change in that for another generation. What's competition like? Well, surprisingly, even though this market is very large, there aren't that many people competing in this field. We see Microsoft, we see Apple going after the mainstream audience, but not tailoring yet. Time to market is very short with this. It's an IT product, it's a software product. Steve and Raul developed this in their basement. Profit margin. Well, when I talk about profit margin, I'm basically saying, do you have a model that will allow you to make money? This one, they're probably not going to make a huge amount of money per sale, but they do have a strategy to make money off of it and to be revenue positive. Do you know who the receptors of your technology are, is the next question. Well, they do. They're going after retirement homes, and they're going after individual people. Clear receptors, and they have had success with retirement homes. If you go on their website, you can see which retirement homes they're now in. So they've had success there. And then, can you get investment? Well, they were on Dragon's Den. I hear it was positively received. I hear there are people who are willing to invest in them. Now, I must say, I see very, 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 very few technologies that actually get check marks across this entire list. So if we look at them in terms of sort of my 4 major factors, market, fantastic. Technology, remember I said very few people can execute? They have a fully working prototype. They have seniors who've used it and vouched for it. Fantastic. I can tell you their IP, it's probably not that great because it's hard to get good IP in this space. But they're still moving ahead, they still have a good product, and I think they have great chances. Here's another product. This is more in line with what I'm used to working with. This is a medical device out of Sunnybrook Research Institute. And actually, some of the guys who helped build this are in the room. And this is a way of treating prostate cancer. The approach is transurethral, so guys might cringe, but the alternative is open surgery, the alternative is radiation, the alternative is chemo. This is rather painless. So let's go through our list. 1, is there a need? Well, yes. Current treatments take a long time, there's a long recovery, and there are a lot of side effects. Does this address that need? Well, it looks like it's going to be faster, it looks like it's going to have fewer side effects, but we really don't fully know that yet. That's still a bit of an unknown. Is the market large and growing? Prostate cancer, largest cancer for men. Clearly a large and growing market. What's competition and barrier? What is competition like? Well, competition is huge. It's a huge market. Of course there are people in here. You have the surgery people. You have the external beam radiation people. You have the brachytherapy people. You now have the robot-assisted surgery people who are doing fantastically well. There's a lot of competition. What's time to market like? This is a medical device. This is a long process. You need to do clinical trials. You need regulatory approval. It's not going to be quick. Profit margin, well, there is a reimbursement scheme. They can make money if they can get it out there. Market receptors, it's clear. It's going to be your urology clinics, your urorad clinics. It's going to be your urologist. It's going to be your hospitals. Can you bring in investment or funding? Well, for this technology, we did manage to bring in venture capital funding, and it's now a self-sustained company. Now, again, if we look at all 5 factors, market, more good than bad, definitely. Technology was great. They had a fully developed system by the time we went out looking for financing. It's now being refined, but they had something they could show, and that helped drive it. IP is pretty good, but again, if you're in this space, it's not going to be completely clean. There's going to be some other stuff out there. Let's look at the team. The team, I think, is sometimes overlooked. But when you look at some of the companies that have done exceptionally well, or the ones who just haven't made it, it often comes down to the team. And for people who are looking at starting your own company, think about who you want to work with, but also think about their skills. You don't want to start a company with 3 other people who are identical to you in skill sets. You want people who are going to complement you, who are going to help along the full line of your technology moving forward. Now, that being said, I've seen a lot of great companies start up, where it was completely started up by engineers, but the ones that were successful had one of those engineers move to the business, move to the management role, someone who's well adaptable to that. On the other hand, I have seen companies that have gotten their first round of financing, a group of engineers. One guy was supposed to be the manager, the business guy, really didn't step up. Now they can't get more financing. So pick your team well and bring on people when you need them. So through this list, people who will move the product forward, you want a team that is willing to invest the time. If you're doing a startup, this is not something quick. This is a long process. You want a team that has realistic expectations. Why I say this is, we always hear, I have the next Google. I have the next RIM. You're really annoying to deal with, I gotta say. But it does turn a lot of people off. You might have that as an end goal, but understand there's steps through there, and you want to hit those milestones through there, otherwise you'll turn people off. And then, it's good if your team has commercialization experience. It's not necessary. Everybody who has commercialization experience had their first time once. At the end of the day, this is what I'm looking for in a team. A group that's reasonable, ethical, can work well together, and in the end can execute, can deliver, can move the product forward. So, a bit of my summary slide. My world starts with an idea. Yours will too. At one point, you're going to have to assess whether your idea is good or not. You might be putting this off. I hope that you can use some of the ideas I spoke about today to assess your technology. And when you do that, you might find that there are too many holes. You might find that someone else has these key patents and you just can't move forward. If that's the case, go back to the drawing board. I've rarely seen an entrepreneur who's only been at it once. Serial entrepreneurs are the norm. You'll have another idea. Hopefully, you will go through this process. You will find strengths, you will find weaknesses, but at the end of the day, you'll say, this is worthwhile going forward with. If that's the case, don't end it there. Plan for your weaknesses, plan to make them stronger, and build off your strengths. Understand that every question I've asked, every question you'll ask yourself, will be asked of you, and you should have an answer for it and a way of addressing it if you can't. So that's the 23-minute technology evaluation. Now I'm going to focus on a few key areas that often come up in what I do. And one of those is, I have a technology. Do I want to start up a company, or do I want to pass it on to another company? So when I talk about a license, and people might not be familiar with this, this is the idea of selling your technology to an established company. And in return for that, you will get a royalty based on how much they can make selling your technology. You will probably also negotiate for getting some of your costs reimbursed, such as your patent costs. And you can structure this deal in numerous ways. We often see milestones, especially in something like a device or a pharmaceutical agent, where you'll have different clinical trials. And when they pass each of these clinical trials, they'll build value, and so some money will flow back to you. You might also have annual minimums, so if they're not selling up to what they promised, you'll get some fee annually still. Spinoff is probably what you guys are most familiar with. It's what every entrepreneur thinks they're going to do. Create a new company. If you do this, it is your responsibility to build your team, your product, your sales and distribution force, or find out someone else who can do it, and to bring in your financing. Now, your return, because you're going to be a shareholder, is if the company goes public. Not many companies are going public these days, by the way. If you are acquired by a larger player, which is much more common, or if your company is actually revenue positive and you don't want to put all your money into growth, you can pay out dividends and get some return that way. So when do you want to consider doing a license? Well, one reason is that there's a company in which your technology fits very well. So say I have a catheter. I might want to license it to Johnson & Johnson because they have a sales force, they have development capabilities, they're able to move it forward. And you believe, so one of the other reasons is you believe that this other company can get it out there faster, can get it out there better, can have a larger effect than you doing it on your own. You might also have what I call an add-on technology. So say you have a new plasma screen technology. Well, you probably don't want to build TVs. You're probably happy to let Samsung and Sony build TVs, so you can license your technology to them. They'll put it in their product, they'll do the sales, and some money will flow back to you. Licensing also takes a lot less time, and if you have it licensed, there's a lot less risk on you. Both your time, because you can put it to other endeavors, and you can have milestones for them to hit to ensure that you will get something back. But you have to be willing to pass on control to that company. Now, at the same time, you're also passing on responsibility. You're passing on the sleepless nights to this other company. You might consider a spin-off, on the other hand, if you can't find a good company that matches with your technology. There's nobody who's really out there who can move it forward better than you. What you should have is you should have what we call platform technology. And platform technology means that there are different market segments that you can go into. And if you invest more in it, if you build it up, you see the opportunity to go into even more markets. So there's an opportunity for growth. I stole this bullet, potential to be a multi-million-dollar public company. I think when I stole it, it was a 50 million plus company. The idea is you want something that you can grow, something that's going to have high value, probably not just a little gadget on the side. you're going to need a committed team who's going to be able to put in the time. And you probably, if you're not starting with a team that has all the capabilities, you want something that's going to be able to attract in a management team or other expertise that you don't have. And of course, at the end of the day, you want something that has the potential to give you a return for all your time, effort, and money that you are putting into this. So a little bit more on spin-offs. Basically, you believe that you can move the technology forward better than anybody else. It's time-consuming, it's risky, and maybe your time's better spent licensing and then focusing on the next technology. It does have the potential for large upside, and that's why a lot of people opt for spin-off companies. But before you make the decision, spend your time thinking about it, talking to people, so you can make the right decision. One other aspect of spin-offs that's worthwhile considering is not just looking internally at your technology, but looking outside at the industry that you're working in and the companies that would potentially be your licensees or your acquirers. Now, some companies just don't have the capabilities to build up new lines to in-license. And in those cases, they might look at acquisitions as their methods of growing. Certainly, this is what we sometimes see in the medical device business. It seems like the largest players, say the GE, the Siemens, the Boston Scientific, want to see the small companies struggle amongst themselves. And then when there's a clear winner, they want to come down and acquire that clear winner, rather than pick a technology earlier and develop it themselves. On the other hand, some companies have a lot of experience in licensing, and they're well set up to grow their business that way. Another slide I stole. It takes 10 times more time to manage a spin-off than it does a licensing transaction. Having done both sides of it, this is completely true. Quick summary. License makes sense if you have a good fit with another company or if you have an add-on technology. Startups make sense if you have a platform technology, different markets you can go into, or if there's no good licensee, no good person or company in which to cite your technology. Licenses are great in that they're lower effort. You're putting in the hands of hopefully experienced people. Definitely do your due diligence. And you probably have an increased chance of success in terms of getting it out there. There is a downside. You lose control, and potentially your returns are lower at the end. They probably are lower, but they're guaranteed. Startups are fun. You maintain control, at least for a little while, and you have higher potential returns. The downside, it's time-consuming, and there's a risk of failure. Wow, this ended up in there. Whoa, back button. Perfect. Let's talk a little bit about funding, about financing, about bringing in money. I work in tech transfer, so we have, let's say, a close link to the granting agencies. And what I found is the government, I'd say especially the provincial government, is very in favor of innovation, of building up the economy of Ontario, and they're willing to help through a few mechanisms. If you're within a university and your technology is developed in a university, you have access to grants like the NSERC I2I or the CIHR POP grants. These are $100,000 to $150,000 that you can put into moving your technology forward, which is really huge at those early stages when nobody else, no investor is really going to look at you. I would suggest also looking at Ontario Centres of Excellence, which have great programs and can put a little more money towards the business side. HTX is the Health Technology Exchange. I think they're actually located in this building as well. Tony manages the Accelerator Fund here, one of the Accelerator funds between Mars and OCE. There's IRAP, MRI is rolling out their next generation of jobs. There are programs that are out there to help you along. Take a look at them, see if any fit with you, call them up. This is a great way to bring in money, a great way to get started without diluting yourself too much, without giving too much away at the beginning. After that, we have our tried and true, our friends and our family, and the people who foolishly believe in us. A good source to get some initial money to get started. Understand you're taking money from your friends, and there are complications that go along with that. At the end of the day, we generally think of financing from angels and from venture capitalists. I think one thing that most people forget about when they're looking at getting money is what's the other party thinking? And one reason why I love the government is that they're looking at what you're looking at. You want to grow your company, you want to hire people, they want jobs created. You want highly qualified people, they want you to train highly qualified people. You're matched, and they want to return to Ontario, they want to return to Canada. There's a great match. They can give you money, they can give you tax credits. The SHRED program is an incredible program for tax credits. Really, at the end of the day, money coming from the government, even if there are some strings attached, is a gift. Now, angels and venture capitalists often get a bad name, and that's because people don't understand them. They're not there to help you out, really. Their goal is to make money for the people who give them money. And in general, they're looking for a 5 to 10 times return on the money that they put in, and they're looking to get out in a finite period of time, say 5 years. It really depends on the technology. What they can bring to the table is they can bring money. Almost more importantly, if you are going out looking for financing, is you want a group that can bring you guidance. If you find that your largest weakness is you don't have marketing experience, look for an angel that has marketing experience. The other benefit that you can get from this group is you can get their contacts, and that might be your first sales. I know of one company that got funded by a group of radiologists in the States, and they're creating a radiology-based program. So in fact, their investors are going to be there or were some of their first customers. It was a great match. Now, where the government money is a gift, I assure you the angel and venture cap money is not a gift. They're looking for returns. Their best way of reducing their risk is to take as much control and as much of your company for as little money as possible. It's not that they're malicious, it's just their model. So when you interact with them, understand it's a negotiation. Don't get affronted by what they bring to you. Understand what you need, what you can do with it, and what you're willing to give away for that. So Tony actually asked me to talk a little bit about the concept of ownership. And it's probably appropriate that it comes from me since I work within a university setting. And so there's always, the concept of ownership comes up quite often. It's the question, who owns what you develop? So clearly, if you work for a company, they're paying you to develop technology, they own what you make. Now, some companies understand the value of patents, and they're willing to reward you for that. So I've seen some companies that give recognition, might even give promotions based on patenting. Others might give you a $1,000 bonus or another bonus of some structure. And that's really how it works within companies. Now, sometimes you encounter an entrepreneur who just left a company and is starting his own business. And this is where you can get into a bit of a careful situation. Now, that inventor needs to ensure that the company doesn't have any stake to their technology that they're developing, and it doesn't appear as though the company does. And what I would suggest is good communication with your company when you leave and openness on what you're going to do. You also want to be very cognizant of any agreements you might have signed when you started at that company 10 years ago. Confidentiality agreement, non-solicitation agreements, and especially non-competition agreements. Now, working at a university is a very, very unique situation, and each university likes to do things differently. So on the question of ownership, if you're down at Waterloo, you own what you invent. If you are at say, SickKids or UHN or up at Sunnybrook, the hospital or the research institution owns what you invent. If you're at, if you're at a place like U of T, it's jointly owned, and there's some weird and wonderful structure that happens at an early stage to determine who really takes on ownership. But at the end of the day, both the university, and by the university I mean your technology transfer office, and you want to see the technology get out there. And if you think you are the best vehicle to help it get out there, your TTO, your tech transfer office, is going to work with you because their goal is to get technology out the door. And if you present them with a plan on how you're going to do that, they're going to help you do that, and they're going to give you resources. Now, remember I said if you work for a company, they own it, and at the end of the day, you get nothing to maybe $1,000. Working at a university is fantastic. If you develop a patent, and that patent eventually makes money, you are going to share in that money that comes out in a very large way. Depending on the university, depending on your input and otherwise, you can get anywhere from 1/3 of all the money that comes back from that to 75% of all the money that comes back from that. So it's a very, very generous structure that's in place. One last point I'm just going to make on this topic is if you do work for a university or you work for a research setting, or a research institution, and you work on technology that's funded by another company, that company might have a deal with your university or institution and rights to that intellectual property. So don't just assume that if you're at a university that you'll have control over it. Check with your supervisor, check with your tech transfer office, check with your university. Nobody's going to fund you unless they are comfortable with the fact that you own your own intellectual property. Not necessarily own, but that you have control over your own intellectual property and that nobody's going to come out of the woodwork. And that's why if you're coming from a company or a university, you should have that discussion early on with the other party so it's clear and in writing. It's a little bit of a pitch, but I think it's appropriate. I didn't put it at the front end, so I'll put it on the back end. So what do I do? What do we do? If you work with us, what can we offer? So as a tech transfer office, we pay your patent costs. And we went through that earlier. That's huge. We're going to assist you in developing your business plan, your business strategy, commercialization strategy. We have access to a lot of these grants that if you don't work with us, you might not have access to. And we've done it before, and we have the contacts. So if you want to create a startup, we can facilitate that for you. If you're looking to raise financing, we also have our network of contacts, and we can put you in touch with the right people. We also spend an awful lot of time negotiating. We've seen a lot of agreements and a lot of agreement types, and we can add value by assisting on that front. So this second last slide, recurring pitfalls and themes. I stole this from someone as well. I liked it so much. One issue we often encounter is that scientists or entrepreneurs overvalue their technology and sort of describe this as the next Google. And if you have those very, very high expectations, it often becomes very hard to get a deal done at the early stages, to bring in financing, because you want so much. So you really need to keep your expectations real. And also understand that there's probably someone in their basement who's doing something very, very similar. And so you don't want to get too marred early on and slow down too much early on. In general, you want to move quickly through this process. Second thing, and I might even have put this point first if I were making this slide, people in general don't fully grasp the need of their customers. Often what comes to me, actually came to me last week, someone said, this is what radiologists are missing, this is what clinicians are missing, or this could really help X. My answer is always, who? Give me a name. Give me a couple names. Get out there, talk to your customers, or the people who are going to be your customers at the end of the day. People find entrepreneurs fascinating. They like the idea of it. Most will be quite happy to talk to you. So get out there and really define your need, because that's going to, one, help you determine if you have something, and two, after you talk to a few people, I guarantee you it will change the shape of what you think your product is. Finally, disconnect between the business and the science, or the business and the technology. Often people think, I have a technology, it is now 95% of the way there, I just need this little 5% called business, marketing, sales, and so forth. In truth, it takes a lot of effort to get that business side right. It takes a lot of effort to position your product, to bring on partners. And you don't want to play down this side. You want to bring in people who are going to help you get it there, and you want to put resources towards that. So I'm going to end with, this is actually my colleague Curtis. He does similar work to what I do. He's more on the IT side. And we work sort of on the periphery of entrepreneurship. We don't take the risks ourselves. We let you do that. We don't share in the rewards either, so it's fair. But what Curtis can tell you, and I can certainly tell you, is through this process, you're going to get bruised, you're going to get scarred, you're going to get battered. But as you can see, he's still smiling at the end of the day. It's worthwhile. It's a fun process. Thank you.